We move on. We are now going to talk about the hidden processes of death and reincarnation. At the end of this third part of the lecture, we will also address the question, why does the process of reincarnation actually takes place cyclically? So that we will do at the end. But first the question, what is known about the hidden processes of death and reincarnation? The ancient Greeks already stated that sleep and death are twin brothers. They meant that there is an analogy between the processes of sleep and the process of death. And I will show you that in the next image, which we are going to discuss in more detail. So you see on the top level again the processes of sleep and the states of consciousness during sleep, and in the lower array you see the process of death and the corresponding states of consciousness during death. Well, why do I show you this, this image? That is, that it gives the possibility to investigate for yourself if the knowledge given by the Theosophia about the hidden processes of reincarnation and karma could be correct. Just by being very, having a lot of attention when you fall asleep and wake up and thinking things over. Knowledge about what exactly dying and death is very limited in our society. 2 weeks ago we mentioned the research in the Netherlands by the cardiologist Pim van Lommel, who spent many years researching near-death experiences. The conclusion of van Lommel was that human consciousness ultimately is not localized in the brain, but is localized outside the body. This conclusion is perfectly in line with the Theosophia, since man's consciousness has several levels. Let's start at the process of dying. Actually, then the focus of consciousness begins to shift to the more inner planes. What happens after breathing and the heart have stopped? The so-called physical death. The material body slowly begins to disintegrate. In the first phase, after the heart stops, the dying process continues at the inner planes. In the consciousness of the deceased, a retrospection of the past life takes place. It begins in the earliest childhood, and it ends at the last self-conscious moment before physical death. And this process takes several hours. Hence, the importance of making the last thought before the moment of death harmonious and peaceful in nature. This retrospection is called the first panoramic vision, and it is observed by the reincarnating ego, which at that moment overshadows or outshines the personal man, which is, as it were, numbed. The reincarnating ego can see the justice of everything that has happened, and depending on the person, he also oversees relationships with previous lives. He can also see what the effect will be on future incarnations. The stream of consciousness is finally withdrawn from the body after this panoramic vision, making death complete. Then there is a state of total unself-consciousness again. For just as we do not fall asleep self-consciously, neither do we die self-consciously. This process takes place with all people, including those who, for example, have been mentally handicapped during their past life. Of course, life experience is necessary. For example, with a child who dies young, this is still very limited. An analogy can be seen with falling asleep, just like the evening review of the past day. At the end of the panoramic vision, the imperishable higher principle of consciousness withdraws in a flash to the inner planes. What happens after death of the body at the various planes of consciousness? The personal ego now enters a state called Kama Loka, which means place of desires. It's a sphere, a plane in the sphere of the earth, but less material than our plane. In this state, the working out of life energy takes place in the form of constant repetition and continued living of certain thoughts, desires and actions. Only when man uses his free will, he can stop this process. And in our present stage of evolution, we possess that ability only at this material plane. That is, when in the possession of our body. At all other planes, such as Kamaloka, this repetition process continues automatically until the energy for that plane is used up. During this process of repetition, a process of separation takes place between the higher and all the lower thoughts into which energy has been put during the last life. This process corresponds to that of the dream sleep, swapna. The duration and nature of this Kama Loka state is determined by man's orientation. Is he focused on the lower, the personal side of his nature, and to what extent? And or on the higher, superpersonal side of his nature, and to what extent? Ultimately, the lower parts, such as lower thoughts, desires, feelings and atoms, are released, and the experiences of man's higher mind are free to join the higher parts of the human constitution, the reincarnating ego. This moment is referred to by various sages from the past, such as the Apostle Paul, as the second death. And just before the second death takes place, the second panoramic vision takes place, although this is less clear and complete than the first panoramic vision. When, after the second death, the deceased person slowly comes to consciousness at the level of higher thought, the level of the reincarnating ego, a new state of consciousness referred to as Devachan begins. Devachan means land of the gods. It is a period of rest corresponding to that of the dreamless sleep, Sushupti. This peace resembles a dream state in which man once again experiences all the happy experiences of life on earth, not mixed with sad or unpleasant memories. Man, the reincarnating ego, is free and all good intentions and aspirations from the previous life are fulfilled in his consciousness. All experiences of the higher mind, all life lessons, insights and experiences of unity are absorbed, woven and assimilated into his character, which is thereby ennobled. I want to dwell on that a little longer. In fact, there are no new experiences during the period of Devachan, but it is about internalizing the lessons and insights learned from the past life. The duration of the Devachanic period is on average 100 times the length of the last life. However, this can vary greatly individually. Factors that play a role is the deceased focused on spiritual or on the material and personal matters. The motive for wanting to be present on earth again, for your personal interest or for superpersonal interests, for your higher ideals. For all humanity, the average age is around 20 years only. That means that for all of humanity, an average of about 2,000 years there is an average of 2,000 years between two incarnations. But again, individually, this can vary considerably. However, the reincarnating ego, who is in the Devachan state, does not experience this as being divided into days and years. It is the same as with normal sleep. When we wake up in the dark, we also cannot tell whether we have slept for a few minutes or a few hours. At the end of that period, the energy for these Devachanic dreams gradually becomes depleted, and the ego, based on the assimilated higher thoughts, begins to long for a more active, manifested existence again. Vague memories of past lives on earth now begin to emerge as mental images. And just as the higher aspirations prior to death exerted their upward pull, so now the desire for life on earth becomes more and more powerful. And the reincarnating ego projects a ray of consciousness into the lower planes to re-embody himself. When descending to the material plane, the human ego follows the same path as after dying, but in reverse order. As the ray is projected into lower planes, the seeds of the previous embodiments are again inspired and attracted to the various planes. And this so-called psychomagnetic attraction takes place just as a magnet attracts iron filings and not copper filings. These seeds, once again, ensure the building up of the inner constitution of man. That means that the former thoughts, desires, feeling and atoms are picked up again. And please note, man will return as a human being and not as an animal or a plant. Because the human ego has already definitely left behind those last two evolutionary stages of consciousness. In the state of Kamaloka, a new personal ego, a new personality is built up, and karmically the relationship with the proper matching mental atmosphere is established through psychomagnetic attraction. And at some point, conception takes place on the physical plane and the development of the embryo begins. And just before the ego re-enters life on our material earth, the reincarnating ego has a clear retrospective of its last life or lives. It is the same bright panoramic vision as immediately after dying. And based on this retrospection and the assimilated higher thoughts, the ego sees this responsibility for all his actions and understands the consequences that will result from this. He gets a preview of the new life on earth and sees the justice of all the experiences that await it. Just as in the morning, we have a preview of the day to come based on the thoughts of the day before. And then, after a period of about 9 months, a baby is born who has become refreshed and wiser, picking up the thread here on earth again. Exactly as the researcher Stickel's college students, a subject, had become even better at playing the computer game Tetris after a good night of sleep. And around the 21st year, the reincarnation is complete and the personal human being is again ready to learn important life lessons and make independently sense of his new life. So, what is known about the hidden processes of death and reincarnation? The Theosophia provides a detailed description of the various process steps and the experiences that the human consciousness experiences. And that is also represented again in a different picture which you see here, with the cyclic process given in this image, where you see the waking state, the Kamaloka state and the Devachanic state when we talk about dying and the period of death between two lives, and again birth when reincarnation takes place. Now I would like to address the question, why does the process of reincarnation take place cyclically? The answer is easy to give if we see again the analogy with the process of waking and sleeping. With sleep, we see mainly the recovery of the body, the recovery of the senses and so on. At death and Devachan, we see especially the recovery of the inner psychological part of the human being. And we can also compare this with the shorter annual cycle that we know. We work and or study for a large part of the year and we rest during the holiday period. But at the end of the holiday period, we start to think energetically again about the things we want to tackle again in the coming year. And in general, we can always make a fresh start without the memory of past lives. It is the idea of new rounds, new opportunities to learn life lessons. This idea also appears in the various mythologies in the world. Like, for instance, in the myths of the ancient Greeks. There we see the story that before coming to earth, the ego had to cross the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, in order, by drinking its water, to forget the past. All this indicates the compassionate way in which nature works. Conclusion: why does the process of reincarnation take place cyclically? At cyclic times there is an attraction in consciousness that is directed toward activity in the body, or it is directed toward passivity, toward internalizing, toward resting. I would like to sum up the lecture of today. Sleep and death processes are analogous. They are both cyclic, that is, that they focus consciousness either on activity or on passivity. We can recognize the same states of consciousness, and also we see that during sleep and also during death, learning lessons are being internalized. We also have learned that the human consciousness has at least 4 layers or 4 qualities, 4 states that are related to 4 planes of existence. And the sources for determining that is our own experience, scientific research, and also the knowledge of the Theosophia. Insight into those processes increases the understanding of the meaning of life. And we can see that again by showing this image again. We can see life as being imagined as a spiral in which each cycle, each new incarnation, a winding of the spiral can be reached on a higher level. It is the ascent from imperfection to perfection and the gradual development toward union with the inner spiritual core of us. In short, life is a school in which it is never too late to learn. Every life anew, and during life until the last minute. And our attitude and motivation determine how fast we learn in the school of life. We will take a break again for 3 minutes, and you are invited to send in again your questions to the chat or to the email address. Thank you and see you within 3 minutes. I would say yes, because if you look at death as a let's say, a process you have gone through many times already, so it is, I think, if you go through this process, you will recognize things because you've gone through it so many times, like you recognize things when you go to bed after a day of work and you want to sleep, then you also, that feels very, let's say, you recognize it because you've done it 1,000 times. So with the process of death it is the same, but especially if you know that it is only a change of condition or a change of state. When you die in this life, you will be born in the afterlife, so to speak, and it is the same as when you are during your life, you go from one situation to another, you die in an old situation and you are born in a new situation. For instance, when you change your job, that's the same process basically. But if you know that death is a process that is quite natural, then of course when disease comes, which is in the end something that makes you die, then that is something that can be can go with suffering. But when you see that as something that is caused by your own behavior, then it becomes already different. You are not a victim anymore, but you can understand, yeah, okay, this is happening because there were some causes in the past which I have caused myself. So that makes it more bearable, so to speak. And the same goes for dying. If you know that it is only temporarily not being present here, and temporarily saying goodbye to everyone before you say hello again when you come back, then that makes it all quite different than when you think you have only one life and you're going to die, and what will come next? You don't know. You think everything ends, you stop to exist. So it's a completely different perspective. The continuity of your life goes on. You go from the living state into the afterlife state. But you're still there, only you are by yourself, and you think all the time things over, and then you come back.
Yeah, I'm triggered by what you said about the different phases in your life. It could be very interesting to look at the school system in this way. So at the end of a school year, you have your panoramic vision of that year instead of just grades. During the summer, you think about it and you take the lessons learned within the next year.
Yeah, sure, sure. And then you come back refreshed. You are more mature. By letting it go for some months or weeks, you also digest it mentally, internalize it, assimilate it, and then you come back more mature, and you can continue with a next grade.
Yeah.
And so it's with life.
Yeah. So there's another question. I hope I can phrase it well. You said that when we die, we implement or we take the higher characteristics of that life, like the higher manas. But when we are born again, we often see that we still have very personal or selfish characteristics. How is that possible?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that when you reincarnate, you are exposed to situations and where you are challenged, so to speak, whether you react in a superpersonal way or on a personal way. And it is indeed the case that when you die, you extract the superpersonal lessons learned and you assimilate them in your character. But as long as your character is not 100% superpersonal, that means that you have not gained all the wisdom and insights that you need in any condition or any situation where you will be exposed to. So you will, your conscience has matured and has increased to a higher level, but it is not perfect yet. And the lessons of the many lives is to improve and make your conscience, let's say, 100% superpersonal. And that takes many lives in order to improve yourself, because if it's not covering your 100% of your characteristics, so that in all situations you are able to react in a superpersonal way, only then you are, have become totally harmonic, so to speak. And until that is the case, you still have a consciousness that has potential for growth. And although you take with you all your higher characteristics, you are not perfect yet, and you have to work on things in order to be able to identify during your next life that sometimes you don't react not in a purely superpersonal way, and it is in fact learning to use the 7 aspects of your mind, of your thinking, in a perfect way. And perfect, I mean in such a way that you always start from thinking of the unity of life, that all life is interconnected, and that whatever you think and do is not hampering the possibilities of development of any living entity. And if you manage to do that, then you have accomplished, let's say, the 100% complete conscience, and then you have made a next step in your development, and in fact you have ennobled your lower characteristics, the lower parts of your thinking. You have lifted that to becoming super personal, and you will not show that personal behavior anymore. That is how I try to explain it.
Yeah. Okay. No more questions.
No more questions.
That's it.
Well, thank you all for your attention and for your very good questions. We are going to announce first that next week we will have a study on the subject of the lecture of today. And on the website you can subscribe again for the Zoom session we will have a week from now. And then you will receive the link for the Zoom session. And also you will be able to download a short reader on the theme of the study. So I really welcome your participation in the study of next week. We will close the lecture of today with the Gayatri from the Rig Veda, and it runs as follows. O thou golden sun of most excellent splendor, illumine our hearts and fill our minds, so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity, which is the heart of the universe, may see the pathway before our feet and tread it to those distant goals of perfection, stimulated by thine own radiant light.